there's a sort of tension between what is needed for the economy and politics. Why on earth did the government feel that there was a need for a tax cut? The GDP numbers are saying one thing, and many of the other indicators that we have are saying another thing. So it becomes very, very difficult to know how the economy is doing.
Hello and welcome. I'm Josh Felman, and I'm joined by my editor-in-chief, Mr. S. Srinivasan. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has announced tax breaks on a barrage of goods in an attempt to spur consumption. We also have US President Donald amid Trump tariffs. And joining us to decode further is former IMF India representative, Mr. Josh Felman. Josh, thank you very much indeed for your time. Let me begin with you there. US President Donald Trump had announced that, in a way, hinted that there could be more tariff coming India's way. Here already there's a tariff of about 15% in India. And all this is happening on the backdrop of India sort of flexing its muscles with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the SCO summit and sort of flirting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And, we also have the Commerce Ministry says there are back-channel talks as well. How optimistic are you about these back-channel talks to fructify, or you think India should be looking out for something else? What's your suggestion?
Well, first, I'm not in any way an expert on U.S. policy. Mm-hmm. So this is not really something that I know much about. There was a long time ago, there was a very famous economist, one of the first econometricians with a model to try and explain the economy. And he had a very famous saying. He said, I can give you a number and I can give you a date, but please don't ask me for both. It's pretty obvious to me that this problem will get solved at some point. I'm sure there are back-channel discussions going on right now. That has to be true, just as a matter of logic. I don't know anything, but when they will fructify into an agreement, I don't think anyone outside the very few people who are directly involved has any good idea. And so I think everyone needs to plan on the assumption that the Trump tariffs will be there for some time, and so adjustments need to be made.
In an interview to us in February, you had said that one advice you gave to India was, because in 24 December when Trump took over, he said, I'm going to impose tariffs on all countries. So that time, in February, you said 25 this year, you said that India should reduce its, export dependence on the US. Now, when we look back, I think your suggestion was, in a way prescient. Now, what do you feel? How could we do this now? Because it's really the sword is, as far as exporters are concerned, hanging on their head. In what way there's possibility of diversifying the trade?
Well, the most obvious strategy right now is to work very hard to come to a trade pact with the European Union. These discussions have been going on for a long time, but we haven't seen any result yet. And I would say that has to be the number one trade strategy right now. And then, of course, I think it's very, very important to develop relations with ASEAN, because in India really, for India to become a global manufacturing superpower, it really needs to integrate into global supply chains. And that the global supply chains right now are shifting out of China into ASEAN. And so it becomes very important to develop relations further with ASEAN. India has some trade agreements with ASEAN, but a whole lot more could be done to develop relations.
But what's your take on this? We've been signing a barrage of FTAs, right? Foreign trade agreements, with other countries. You think that's a fair choice that India should be doing? But we missed out an opportunity. You said we should be having great relationship with ASEAN. India missed an opportunity with the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. You think FTAs would add up to that, or you think we should be looking for some bigger partnership like this?
There's a sort of tension between what is needed for the economy and politics. Politically, of course, it's very difficult to have close economic relations with China, but it's also true that China is the workshop of the world, and if India is to attract businesses that are thinking of moving out of China, then India does need to have some sort of cooperation with China on trade. So, for example, I mean, just to be very, very practical here, if a Chinese businessman realizes that he should move his factory out of China to India, that obviously economically that benefits India, but if India doesn't want Chinese investment, then that shift will be blocked. So these are thorny political issues. That's why I was focusing on less politically difficult issues, such as agreements with the EU, agreements with ASEAN.
Let's come to the GST, the decision recently taken. Now the number of slabs have obviously been reduced than what it was earlier. A lot more work needs to be done. That's what your other economists told us, and it's not that this is the end of reforms. A lot more reforms need to be done. What would your prescription be? What are the other things you think that could have been done to make GST even better?
If there are the system, if you listen to what's commonly reported, you get the impression that now there are going to be just two rates of GST. 18, 28%, but that's not true at all. Actually, of course, they introduced a third rate, this 40% rate on so-called sin products, but also there are many different rates. Prior to this reform, there are actually not 4 rates of GST, but there were 45 rates, all depending on the value of the good, the end use of the good, all sorts of other things. Some of that has now been cleaned up, but a lot of that remains. The obvious example is that people are aware of is very different rates on smaller cars and bigger cars. So we're still a long way from this good and simple tax that was promised. That's one thing. A second thing that I worry about is that in some respects, we've actually gone a bit backwards in that for a fair number of goods, ITC, input tax credit, has been abolished. And what that means is that in effect, on these goods, you no longer have a GST, that is to say a tax on value added, you have a tax on the selling price, and this is pretty much the same as the old excise taxes. So for these products, you've gone back to the old excise tax system, which had a number of big disadvantages. The main one of which is that it favors large integrated firms over smaller firms that are less integrated. Because the way to get around the problems of an excise tax is to produce everything yourself. So, for example, for packaged roti, to grow the grain, to process it, to sell it, then you can outcompete, say, a Kirana shop, which buys a package at wholesale, then retails it. But because they bought it at wholesale, they're going to need to pay GST, but now they won't be able to collect input tax credit on the GST that they paid, so that they're going to be at a competitive disadvantage against an integrated firm that say manufactures and retails at the same time. So now, to a certain extent, you can understand why they may have done that, because there are administrative problems in keeping track of ITC. There's a fear of cheating on ITC. So one can understand maybe why they did it, but it does tilt the playing field compared to a GST, which treats more or less everyone the same.
Yeah, so you gave the examples of goods, but also on services. Say, for instance, health insurance.
Yes.
ITC, again,
Right.
they're not giving. So,
Right.
Two things. Will it make products expensive, or also the thing is cascading effect, therefore inflationary?
Yeah. Of course, what's, as I said, what's going to happen is that it may not increase prices at all, but what it will do definitely is favor large integrated producers at the expense of smaller firms. Where generally, of course, the tax cuts should reduce prices. The large the auto manufacturers have said that they could reduce the price of an SUV by around 1 lakh, depending on the model. So that will clearly help consumers. But generally, of course, the effect on prices will depend on whether the manufacturers and retailers pass the GST cuts on.
How do you see this reform? Does this have the potential to sort of revive private investment, the capacity utilization somewhere in the mid-70s again, or is it largely a short-term consumption stimuli? When the finance minister did the tax breaks last time, you said it won't be able to sort of revive consumption. We don't really see any kind of spike in terms of urban consumption. You still think that this particular reform would be able to do that?
Obviously, it's going to have some short-term impact. If you reduce the price of SUVs by 1 lakh, that's significant, and people will buy more SUVs. There's no doubt about that. But as I said, the longer-term impact on growth really depends on whether you're creating a simple tax regime that treats everyone equally. And we're still a long way away from that. The benefits of simplification and a level playing field on growth could be enormous, but I don't think they're going to be realized. And then more generally, of course, a reform like this doesn't really get at the heart of why firms are not investing. Firms are not investing because they see huge risks in the Indian economy. They see risks most recently from the Trump tariffs, which has made firms think about twice about investing in, say, export capacity. It's going to make service firms, for example, who are thinking of expanding their GCCs or the IT companies a little bit nervous about expanding. Then you've got the risks that were always there, the risks of policy reversals, the risks of uneven playing fields favoring national champions, the risks of tax raids. All of these risks, if anything, have intensified over the past few months. When I say intensified, I mean because of the Trump tariffs, and that's going to continue to hold back investment.
There is a kind of a double whammy which seemed to have happened to the Indian economy. Already, the domestic consumption wasn't picking up. There was trouble. On the other hand, there is also Trump tariff which have hit from the other side. And combined with these two is the government attempt to rekindle consumption. You feel that these kind of these measures may not have any desirable impact. What kind of impact do you think finally it might end up in the growth prospects in the short term and in the long run?
Yeah, there will be some boost to consumption in the short run. There's no doubt, particularly as I said, on things like cars. White goods should become cheaper. I mean, we don't know how well the manufacturers will pass on, but assuming they pass on the GST cuts, this should all help in the short run. But beyond 1 or 2 quarters, after a little while, this boost will fade out, and then you're going to be back to the same long-run problems that I was just discussing.
Yeah. So, last time you had told us that in February when we interviewed, when immediately after that, when there was followed by a tax cut by the Indian government. So you said that, whatever extra money people get in their hands, they may not be, using it to trigger consumption, but probably they would be using it to kind of build their own safety net or a nest. Similarly, these cuts, you don't think it might have any long-term implication. It could only result in a much more defensive approach by the investors. I'm saying people,
Yes.
individual investors.
Yes. No, actually, you see, even from a short-run point of view, right, there's a long chain of events that needs to happen before there's a true boost to the economy that people are skipping over when they say, well, look at these tax cuts, surely it's going to have such a big impact. Let's go through the chain step by step. First, the manufacturers and retailers need to pass on the GST reductions. We've heard from the car manufacturers, we haven't heard from the others. So there's a question mark there. Then the next step is how, as you pointed out, how the consumers react. Maybe if the price of goods becomes lower, they won't really spend more. They will just pocket the money because what they really want to do right now is save, right? So there wouldn't be any increase in aggregate spending. Then the other thing is this tax cut means a loss in revenue to the budget, right? If the government has revenue as budget deficit targets. If they lose revenue, in order to hit the budget deficit target, they need to cut spending. So even if private households increase their spending, it's possible the government may reduce their spending in order to hit the budget deficit target. And so total spending in the economy doesn't change. That's why I don't expect. And then the final point is when you aggregate, when you go through all these steps, let's say there is some, in the end, increase in spending, but we also have to remember that India now has a $4 trillion economy. And so you have to think, how big is this change in spending compared to $4 trillion? Probably not much. And that's why I don't, obviously, as I said, any move toward a simplification of the GST and a move toward tax fairness in the sense of cutting taxes on goods which should never have been taxed at a very high rate. There was no reason why cement should have ever been taxed at 28%. That was a very high rate. And they've corrected that now. So there are some good things, but don't expect it to be, as people like to say, a game changer. That's unrealistic.
But how do you see this from an ease of doing point of view? You see this sort of materially adding up for businesses to sort of invest here in India?
Again, there are some procedural changes that they have taken that will help ease doing business in India. There's no doubt. But the larger risks that I was talking about earlier still remain, and that's going to make businesses very, very cautious.
I have one question. If when I look at the data released by the government, obviously the growth rate is up in the last 3 quarters. GDP has gone up from 6.4 to 7.4 to 7.8 now. So there is, but when you look at the components which constitute GDP, they don't seem to be doing well individually. There seems to be a certain contradiction here. How do you read that? I mean, what is to make? How do you make sense of this?
This is the question that everybody is asking. All of us want simplicity, right? We all want one simple number that tells us how the economy is doing, and that number is normally GDP. But there's been a problem recently in that the GDP numbers don't seem to correspond with people's impressions of how the economy is doing, and even the disaggregated data that we see all the time. So, for example, every month we get numbers on industrial production, IIP, and that shows that the economy is doing very poorly. Every month we get numbers on credit, which show that credit is slowing down. People aren't taking out loans. We get numbers. We get numbers on, for example, corporate results, which show that corporate sales are decelerating very, very sharply to very low levels. We get numbers on inflation, which show that inflation has dropped like a stone. All of that doesn't tally with the GDP numbers, and that creates a lot of confusion in people's mind about how the economy really is doing.
But so you mean to say that the GDP numbers that India is putting out is kind of skewed in a way, isn't it? Distorted, skewed, fudged. Is it what you're saying?
I'm saying that there's a lot of confusion out there uh, uh, about how the GDP numbers are saying one thing, and many of the other indicators that we have are saying another thing. So it becomes very, very difficult to know how the economy is doing. This is also creating confusion, not just, I have to say, for the households and businessmen trying to decide whether to invest, but you can also see it for the government. So, for example, if the economy is really booming, why on earth did the government feel that there was a need for a tax cut? You only give, the argument for the tax cut was we need to help consumption. But if the economy is booming, why do you need to help consumption? Similarly, if you look at the RBI, all the debate is, should the RBI cut interest rates? But again, if the economy is booming, why do you need to cut interest rates? So it seems to me that there is a bit of confusion, even on the part of the policymakers, about how the economy is really doing.
Right. So I have one final question, two components to this question. I would like to know, how do you think this GST reform 2.0 is likely to impact on two crucial sectors? One is MSME, what kind of impact it may have on MSME. That's very crucial. What do you feel about that?
Probably a sort of mixed effect, depending exactly on what sector you're talking about, and because some goods produced by MSMEs will benefit from lower tax rates, and that will help the MSMEs. But other goods for which, for example, the ITC has been removed, as I explained, that will end up hurting MSMEs. So it will really vary according to exactly what MSME you're talking about and what good you're talking about.